Hello and welcome to today's episode. I'm Lindsay Francis, and today I'm so excited to be talking to Natalie Koussa. Natalie, you are a podcast strategist and visibility coach for podcast guests, and your role is growing visibility and sales authentically. Is that right? And would you like to give me a better intro
No,
than
that's
that?
fab. Hi, Lindsay. Thanks so much for having me. Yeah, so my work is all about helping typically online entrepreneurs turn their message into a movement by speaking on podcasts. It's all about going on a podcast guest tour. So really speaking on a whole range of different podcasts, sharing your message, connecting with listeners, and using it as a way to create ripples of impact and also to invite clients into your business.
Amazing. And the reason I'm so drawn to your work and have been following you for so long is because exactly what you've just said, turn your message into a movement. It's this unique identity that we've got that you're giving people the resources to share with the world. And I just think it's so human and it's so powerful.
Thank you. It is.
How did you end up doing this? Can you tell us a bit of the story?
Absolutely. So before I started my business, way back in the day, I was a social worker. I did some family therapy training as a social worker, transitioned into non-profits. And my last role in the non-profit sector was as director of partnerships for a pro-choice end-of-life charity. And my role in that charity was influence, essentially. I was quoted in the New York Times, in the Guardian. I used to speak on breakfast radio, and I was talking about death. It's not something that's always easy for people to talk about. It's not something that people always want to engage in, but our role was really about bringing that conversation into the mainstream and influencing policy and helping people make their own decisions about the way in which they wanted to die. And in that role, I learned so much about messaging and influencing people and really leading a movement and connecting with people on a deeper level about something that means, something really personal to them. So when in that role, I started listening to podcasts. This is actually what got me into it. So I was living in London at the time on this pretty horrific commute. If anyone's lived in London, you will understand what I mean. Being jammed up in somebody's armpit on the tube. And I was really just thinking, I really want to take my creativity in a different direction. I've always wanted to work for myself. I've got some really good skills that I've built throughout my career. So I started listening to podcasts about the online business space. And day after day, just learning and hearing people's stories. And I really fell in love with it as a medium. I really fell in love with the intimacy of getting to know somebody's voice and hearing their ideas and being able to kind of implement some of what they're sharing in your own life without them even ever knowing, usually. It's usually anonymous. Anyway, it really just sparked my kind of creativity, and then I started using podcast guesting as a marketing tool in my own business, and the rest is history.
I mean, now, of course, I want to ask you a million other questions about fear of death because it's such a massive part of the work I do, but that would be digressing a little bit too early. The whole thing of podcasting as a marketing medium is something that's quite new from what I've seen in the sort of promote your own business, six days to 6 million, these things we see on Instagram. Tell me what the landscape looks like for podcasts as marketing tools, because I feel like this is a new thing I haven't seen a huge amount of discussion about how this actually works.
It's really rising in popularity, Lindsay, because people are seeing just how effective it is. So there are tons of different ways of marketing your business, of course. And the way that most people typically do it when they're brand new into the online space is going all in on social media. And there's lots to be said for that. It's very kind of low barrier. You just, you can type on your phone, 3 seconds later, you're up on Instagram or you're chatting away on Threads. There's so much to be said for social media. But the challenge is that it's difficult to build a platform only on social media. It used to be much easier. It's now very, very difficult. So coming in as somebody newer, or even as you're somebody that's established, but really wants to take your visibility and your impact to the next level, it's so helpful to layer in a kind of visibility that has that intimacy and has that depth in the conversations. So what makes podcast guesting so unique is that every time you speak on a podcast, you're personally introduced to the host's community. So that's a community they've been pouring into, that they have a relationship with, that there's usually a lot of trust there. So then there's that transfer of trust that happens, that kind of transfers to the guest. So speaking on podcasts gives you this earned reputation as an expert, because anybody can post on Instagram, put the perfect post there, but to be able to talk about your topic for 30 minutes minimum and to really, on the fly answer questions and give some nuance and, bring your personality to what you're doing, it really shows your expertise and the contribution that you're making to your clients.
That's a beautiful, beautiful explanation. It really speaks to the whole title of my own podcast, Human, because you're building that credibility and demonstrating the fact that you do have the knowledge and experience to be supporting people in whichever way you're supporting them. And I love to talk to people, hence I started a podcast before taking part in Speak Easy, which is an interesting way of dealing with things. And of course, I'm now on the list to start in January. But I've been trying to use my podcast to record testimonials of clients that have worked with me through sophrology, because sophrology is not very well known in the English-speaking world. So I think that was where sort of my burning ambition started. But having conversations like this with people like you, I mean, it just makes my heart sing. I absolutely love it. And I know that there's an audience out there that are really enjoying these conversations as well. So it ticks so many boxes. I've also got teenage girls, and social media, let's not talk about TikTok and all these other things they're doing, drives me nuts. Can you tell us, Natalie, about the interface between the two? They do need to touch at some point. What do you say to people about that?
So I teach something called a love at first listen funnel, which is, it sounds way more complex than it is. Essentially what happens when you speak on podcasts, most people think about podcast guesting as the awareness part of, brand awareness, meeting brand new people. And then you're going to have to do tons more work to, get to know them and lead them on the buyer journey and nurture them and so on. But what I found to be true is the opposite, is that when you speak on a podcast, when you know the right stories to tell, when you're able to share your experience and meet the listeners exactly where they are, you can move them to action within that episode. When listeners are your ideal client and when they're in that ready to solve their problem phase and when they're ready to make the moves towards the thing that you do, they don't need tons of nurturing on Instagram or social media. The way that I teach it is give everything away in the episode, learn how to tell the stories that kind of touch on the kinds of things that listeners are going to be asking, the kinds of hesitations they have. And then from the episode, you can invite people straight into your world in a deeper way. So not saying, come follow me on Instagram or TikTok or, just bypass social media and invite them onto your email list. And the best way that I've seen from my clients and myself of doing this is having a private podcast that shares. So a private podcast is the same medium, of course, so we know that podcast listeners, and I include myself in this, we're incredibly loyal. We find a show, we love the host, we build that relationship, we tune in every week, and we typically form habits around how we listen to podcasts. So for me, it's on my walk to the gym every morning. I'm one of those people, I'd love to be a morning person. I'm just not really. So I'm not one of those people that wakes up in the morning and thinks, oh my God, I can't wait to get to the gym. But what I do think is, I can't wait to listen to that conversation that I've got lined up. And then I listen to the conversation. By the time I've got to the gym, I'm here now, but in my brain, it feels like, let me just listen to this conversation. And that's how podcast listeners experience podcasts. So if you can give a really good valuable, meeting people where they are episode, and then invite them into a private podcast where they opt in with their email address. It's delivered personally to them, and you can go deeper into your point of view, your movement making message. This is where you can start talking more about your offers and how people can work with you. You can create a pretty end-to-end funnel just with those two activities. It can be so simple, Lindsay.
Do you know, that is music to my ears, Natalie, because if I see one more advert for funnels or what's those pages, those, you're meant to buy the pages that scrolls through and the technology and it's all going horribly wrong. I just find it so overwhelming. And as I said to you before we started the show, I'm a sophrologist, coach and psychologist by trade, not a tech wizard, but I've got to share what I do. And sophrology is not well known outside of the sort of European speaking areas. So in English, it's not really well known as a method, but this is just perfect. And it's the most human and authentic way I can think of sharing what I'm doing. And I think for thousands of other people as well.
Absolutely. It's also, your podcast is literally called Human. Like, there's nothing more human than just rocking up, having a conversation, sharing who you are, being generous enough to let listeners kind of discover who you are and get to know you as well. And to me, it is marketing. Technically, of course it is. It's a very effective way of marketing. But to me, it doesn't feel like marketing. It feels like sharing who I am and sharing what I can contribute to people's lives. And I know that is what marketing is. But what I mean is that the feeling of it is something much more human. It feels really energizing instead of, for me, sitting down to write an Instagram post. It's just the opposite of energizing.
I think that's so important. I'm a massive fan of the whole concept of energy and consciousness. And you're right, there's an energy to this that feels human. We're back to these indigenous protocols of community, storytelling, living in a tribe. These are the things that are really part of who we were designed to be. And, we're having a chit chat today as if we'd, gone for a coffee or gone for a walk, met at the gym, we're having perhaps a drink after work. And that's, when you work for yourself or you perhaps work from home, I really miss that world that I lived in 20 years ago.
Yeah, absolutely. I was listening last night too. So I live in Ireland, and our president is this incredible man called Michael D. Higgins. And he is, I'm not sure how old he is, but I'm guessing in his 70s. And he just has this wealth of life inside him, and he's all twinkly eyed and curious, and he's just this incredible man. And he was talking about the number one thing that he thinks is important as you age is not letting yourself become indifferent. He said the number one thing is curiosity and asking people questions and meeting them where they are. I just found it so, inspiring is such a crap word, isn't it? It's so cheesy, but it genuinely was this really inspiring conversation. It was making me think that that's essentially what we're doing every time we speak on a podcast. We're getting to know somebody new. We're listening to, I've never had a conversation about sophrology before. And you're kind of dropping snippets in here. And it's just it really truly is a very human way of just connecting on just the most kind of basic way that we have throughout humanity.
I think that word curiosity is something I absolutely love, because there's this weird curated nature, we can call it, the echo chamber of social media. We can have this curation that's now happening around the newsfeed that we get, or the way that let's not dive into being manipulated by the algorithm, but clearly we know that, we're not going to the corner shop on a Sunday and buying, if you bought the Telegraph in my teenage years, you were one sort of voter, and if you bought the Times, you were another. We're not in that world anymore. But when you start becoming curious, I often feel like people think, oh, it's a bit confrontational. Curiosity and confrontation are two very different things, but it feels like the sort of level of curiosity is almost not terribly welcome in this curated, shiny world. And I wonder what you think about that, because you're also a curious person. You ask lovely questions, and all of your presence online reflects who you are and where you came from. What do you think, Natalie? If I say curiosity or confrontation, what do you think?
I think it's such an interesting perspective. It really does kind of give this glimmer of recognition that I do really see where you're coming from. For me, I mean, as you said, they're two completely different things. I literally make a living out of being curious. Like people, the business owners that I work with, that I support them to develop their messaging and their positioning and, become incredibly successful podcast guests, the way that I do that is curiosity. It's about truly understanding what their work in the world is, who they work with, and what's their unique perspective, what's that unique positioning that we can pull out. Because there's, even for sophrology, you're right, it's not super well known in the English speaking world, but there will still be hundreds or thousands of you doing what you do. So it's about pulling out the nuance and that kind of very unique way that you do the thing you do, and then wrapping it in language that your people can understand, and wrapping it in language that creates this sense of, I think, movement making messaging at its heart creates a sense of belonging. It's about identity at its heart. So to me, curiosity is the only way of creating positioning that actually is unique and actually does its job of helping you become a one of one in the market that you work in.
I love that. One of one. And being unique but united in that mission and messaging is something that I see people, this is sort of blandness or fear of visibility. I was working with a client yesterday. I can really see that they're actually quite frightened to stand up and be who they think they might be inside. There's almost this desire to be in this homogenous mass of what's going on outside. And I was really sort of wrestling with that last night, thinking, well, how can I, my job is to help people become more conscious. Well, you can only become more conscious if you're curious as well. They go hand in hand, because if not, you're just half dead. And I think that the way you put that, unique perspective and a sense of belonging, we know that loneliness and isolation kills. Which neatly brings me back to segueing into where we started, fear of death. Am I allowed to ask you this? Because we can only live fully when we appreciate the fact that our time on earth is limited. And I know that you give a lot of energy to your business and your desires, and you've actually made a huge change in your working life to live more fully. Can you tell me, have you got an awareness of death that's driven that, given the experience you've had? I mean, it's years and years that you worked in that industry. Industry, it's not an industry. That's a terrible word, sorry.
I actually had a weird experience. It happened to me a few years ago where I was incorrectly diagnosed with this very weird thing that was allegedly wrong with me that I could have died from. And it turns out that I didn't have the thing. The doctor misread the scan, that I was completely healthy.
Oh.
I was absolutely fine. But for a few weeks, I was living with the belief that my time might be really limited. And it did change. I mean, I'm lucky that there was nothing wrong with me, but I didn't know that at the time. And it did change how I thought about my life. So I've always been somebody that takes risks and tries the thing. And I would really, really rather fail than not try. Like, to me, not trying is much more painful than failing and just, okay, cool, that failed, let me try something different. But that kind of misdiagnosis was something that I was thinking to myself, what do I want my life to be like? And ever since I was really young, I've wanted to work for myself. But I never did it for, it's a big thing to do. It's scary. And I'm really glad that I did it the way that I did it, because I had so many skills that I developed in my career that I could then bring to my business. But that kind of sense of, oh my God, is this it? What would I do if I only had a few years left? And weirdly for me, working for myself and making my contribution really kind of rose to the top of that, like, bucket list of, all right, let's give it a go.
That's amazing. Thank you so much for sharing that, because we sort of push these feelings away, and especially as you get older. And I can testify to the fact that I don't have as much energy as I had 10 years ago. I don't have the same cognitive flexibility. I don't have the same technical skills. I'm really noticing, gosh, things are changing. But how do I embrace that and really make sure, like you say, I do bring my message to the world, and my message is about consciousness and being alive. You know, what do you really want inside? How do we live from the inside out, not the outside in? And I said to you earlier, I am the first person who listens to 6 days to 6 million and thinks, why am I not doing that in my business? And, you know, realise that I'm totally deluded and go back inside and dial back in. Natalie, what would you say to people who are running their own businesses? They're going to do Speakeasy with you, but they're in that grind of, this is hard. Because we don't want to be negative about this. This is not 6 days to £6 million.
No. Oh, that's not been my experience anyway. If that's the kind of secret you're looking for, I'm not your girl.
I see on Instagram every day. I must be doing something wrong. Tell me.
The people that I see having great success, so both in terms of the peace they feel in their business, the lifestyle that it gives them, and financially, are the people that have done the work to dial in their messaging. For me, that's the one fundamental thing that you cannot skip. And it's ever evolving. So my messaging was the thing that I've been in business for 4 years, roughly at the minute. My message was the one thing that right at the beginning I knew I needed to dial in. And it's still to this day the single part of my business that I put the most effort into. You know, I write at least 2 to 3 emails every single week to my list. I speak on podcasts every single time I open enrollment for my group program, the Speakeasy. I judge the sales page and dial it in. And, you know, every single iteration, every few months of my business, I'm realizing that the work that I'm doing with my clients has evolved, and I have evolved. And the way that you communicate that with future clients, and actually even with current clients, there's something so exciting about working with somebody and seeing them evolve in real time and experiencing the behind the scenes of that evolution and seeing it on the front end. I, as a client, find that so inspiring. So it's something that I really try to model in my own business as well. But for me, that's it. It's as your skills develop, as you create, you know, an incredible body of work, your message is the non-negotiable that connects that body of work to the people that can benefit from it. That's how you create impact.
I think you've just strategically explained exactly the process that we should all be following, and not thinking there's an operational hack to achieving this. It's a very strategic process where the messaging has to be on point. And like you say, we mature with it. It matures with us, and we must communicate that very strongly. I think that's where I feel the podcast sort of spaces are more. I don't want to use the word mature, but it's just a deeper medium than so many other things. Can I ask you to tell our listeners a little bit more about Speakeasy? Because this is quite a unique way of setting up a group program. And I often have people say, I want to work one-to-one rather than a group. And there is a huge value in community, because we know, again, from Indigenous behaviour, if we use that word, or this desire in us to be part of something bigger. Tell us about the Speakeasy and how it works and what people can expect.
Yeah, thank you, Lindsay. So the Speakeasy is my group program where hidden gems become the industry's worst kept secret. And we do it by speaking on podcasts. So it's a 12-month group program. You come in and we go through the entire process of dialing in your messaging, knowing your signature speaker topic, creating fresh angles so that every single time you speak on a podcast, you have a slightly different conversation. The days of going on and repeating the same story episode after episode are long gone. I teach you pitching, I teach you how to find aligned podcasts, and I teach you the Love at First Listen funnel so that when you're out there speaking on your podcast tour, everything that you're doing is inviting aligned future clients into your world and packing it with value and, giving them the next step. It's 12 months. I always want to say this because the 12-month thing, it doesn't take 12 months to to see results. It typically, you start seeing results. If you get in there and start doing the work, you start seeing results around about 90 days. The reason it's 12 months is because it used to be 6. And what I was seeing was people coming in, they were getting incredible results in those 90 days. I'd see them at coaching calls, they'd be in the Slack channel asking questions, and then they'd go quiet because they were just out there speaking on podcasts. They didn't need the support, they had the expertise. But then they'd pop back in at around that 6-month mark saying, oh my God, I've got this massive opportunity. Can you help me? I call it no fuck around and find out pitches. Like, we don't want you sending a pitch thinking, I don't know, the host can judge. We want the pitch that you're sending just being as dialed in and as valuable and as unique as possible before you send it. So that's what I see as people are stacking their visibility, as they're growing into speaking on bigger podcasts. I want them to have that space to come back and really kind of bump up where they are in terms of their messaging.
And that's directly in line with what you've just said about evolving it, maturing it. It's like, whether it's wine or chocolate or whatever it is, this product, you wouldn't open the oven and eat a meal that was only half cooked.
Yeah, I love that.
Cooking process is so important, but we just don't have the patience sometimes. And I love that you structured this program in such a conscious way. That's so important that people understand that this is the long game.
Yeah, but you can also create really quick results within it, but it absolutely is around sustainability. I also book out podcast tours for people. So I do, we start with the positioning, and then I do the end-to-end outreach and bookings and manage all of the pitching and relationships development process. And doing those two things, each of them strengthens the other. Being in the back end of people in the speakeasy and pitching and seeing all these different personalities and ways of doing things that people are bringing, I bring some of that into the work, the done for you work that I do. But then, of course, because I'm booking people every day onto podcasts, I bring the systems that I'm developing into the speakeasy. So both of them strengthen the other.
I love the fact there's a system to this, because in my own experience running my own business, there's a scattergun behaviour that just drains your energy. And there's there's this chimp brain, shiny things, off we go, and, distracting yourself, you become exhausted. It's very, very easy to waste time and energy and money. And I think that's where the investment in a program like this is so important, because it's a proven process. It's very, very strategic. You are very, very experienced in doing what you're doing. And I know from my own experience, you've got some clients who've just had phenomenal results.
I know, it's really fun.
So exciting. It is so exciting. I'm going to ask you one more question, because there's a million things I could ask you about, but I know that I will then be in that danger zone of asking you all sorts of things, and we'll be here for hours, and people are limited always on time. But can I ask you, as somebody who's really involved in the world of visibility, personally, how do you feel, or how do you ensure that you feel safe and grounded in that, remaining highly visible, but not in that sort of striving or overdoing it type world that we can sometimes find ourselves in?
Oh, I love this question, Lindsay.
Sorry.
Genuinely. So this might surprise, it typically surprises people when I say it, but one of the reasons I do what I do is because I personally find visibility so challenging. So that's why I started speaking on podcasts. That's how I recorded my first ever private podcast, is because to me it felt safer. It felt like I was just having chats with the host. I was just rocking up, having a conversation. I can do that. And then, and then it kind of snowballed into being something more strategic. For me, it's about understanding. So I use something called the leadership designs in my work. It's a leadership typography that was developed by Rachel and Sarah Turner, that I'm certified in. And it's not about your personality. It's not kind of personality typing. It's about understanding your core needs as a human. So there are 4 kinds of leadership designs. And I think even if I'll just say what they are in each core need now, and listeners will probably think, oh my God, I'm that one. And even just trying to kind of meet your core need, not 100%. You're never going to be able to meet your core need 100%. You do have to take risks and, feel at your edge sometimes to grow a successful business. I don't think there's any other way. But if you can set up your business in a way that genuinely plays to your strengths, that supports your energy, that meets those core needs, you are going to have such an easier time. It's going to feel so much more smooth. So the 4 leadership designs are, so the first is the nurturer. Their core need is to feel safe. The second is the visionary. These are the big picture thinkers. Their core need is validation. But what I actually see that showing up as is they want recognition. They want to be kind of seen in the bigness of their ideas and in the contribution they're making. Then there's the straight talker. They just want to get straight into it. Their core need is to be in control. So and not that they're a controlling person. They don't want to be in control of others. They want to be in control of their own life. So they are the kind of people that, you just can't tell them anything, like they know that they should have a workout routine, or, they know that this next step would be great for them, but it has to be their own idea. They have to make the decision in their own time. They're typically a very high risk taker as well, because they have such trust in their own decision making. And then the final one is the analyst. This one always makes me laugh. Their core need is to be right. And again, not right in a kind of way over other people, but they are typically a very slow decision maker because they do all the research. They go down the rabbit holes. They want to know that the decision that they're making is the best decision for them. So that takes a bit of a longer time. They're lower risk and kind of slower decision maker. So if you can, there's far more to it, of course, but if you've kind of, if you're listening, if you listen to one of those and you're like, oh God, that one sounds like me, or I'm a combination of these two, they're the ones that stood out. If you can try to weave those elements into your business and into how you show up in your life, everything is going to start working for you and with you, instead of you, that feeling of kind of fighting against the way things are.
I haven't heard of that, the leadership design theory, but I'm now going to obviously obsess about it and hyper-focus for a little while, because that's the kind of person I am, and obviously identified myself. I'm not sure about 2 of those categories. I should go away and think about it. But what an amazing way of guiding people into their own business and their own messaging, by understanding that. I often say to people, leaders cast shadows.
Oh, that's beautiful.
When we're at the front, there is a shadow behind us, and the shadow that we want to cast will depend on who we are, but also how conscious and intentional we are. And when we don't want to cast a shadow of destruction, and this predatory leadership that we've seen in the past is really unhelpful, and it doesn't get the best out of if we're managing a team or we've got some clients that we're supporting. We are leading in these messages that we feel are so important as our mission. And when we understand what that looks like and who we are, who we're called to be, then we can really make the most impact. So that's just a beautiful thing to have shared, Natalie. And I think we could probably podcast on that for another hour. Again, it's so interesting, but the fact that you're actually weaving that into this program, it's so much more than just I've just bought this course on Instagram about podcasting. What you're delivering is strategic support for people's the life of their business.
Yeah, thank you. That's a really beautiful reflection. Yeah.
I've been, like, as I said, I've been following your work for a while, and we came obviously into contact through another program that we were both in, and I think this is it's so important to be human about this, and open and authentic, because it's hard to be visible. We feel very vulnerable when we're outside of the tribe, or putting our heads above the parapet, or whatever sort of picture you want to use. But when we do it in our own, our actual own gifting, then it makes it so much more authentic and so much more sustainable.
Absolutely.
Amazing. Well, I got a million questions we could talk about, and things I could ask you. But I think for now, Natalie, if people would like to know more, what's the best way of contacting you or getting hold of you to talk more about what you do, and also Speakeasy?
Yeah, thank you, Lindsay. So the best place to go is nataliekoussa.com. It's Koussa. And then /visible. If you go there, there is a private podcast that you can sign up for and download. And it's 3 episodes really helping you show up as the kind of podcast guest that grows your business from your podcast tour. It will also connect you into my email list. All the good stuff in my business happens in my emails, so that's the best place. And if you do just want to get in touch with me, you can email me or you can DM me on Instagram. I don't post much there, but I am there in the DMs. So if you want to share a takeaway, or I'd love to hear from you.
Amazing. Of course, any comments on the podcast that come through any of the platforms, we will share. But if you would like to speak to Natalie, onto her website or into her Instagram, and DM her there. And the same goes, of course, for me, lindsayfrancis.co.uk. And sophrology and speaking on the podcast and making your mission your message. I have got that the right around, haven't I?
I call it turning your message into a movement, but yeah, it's a bit of a tongue twister. It's all the meaning's the same.
Is really about being human and being you and being uniquely you, which requires consciousness. That's the sophrology part. Awareness of who you are, the leadership part, and what it is you're actually trying to share. I think it's just a beautiful way of looking at things, and waving goodbye to that weird vortex of social media where I think I should be doing this, I should be doing that. This is much more about playing the long game. So, Natalie, thank you so much. Anything you'd like to add, or anything else you'd like to share with people, or should we save that for the next time?
Oh, just thank you so much for having me, Lindsay. It's been an absolute joy to be with you. Thank you for having me.